The Galactic Council chamber floated in the void between stars, a massive structure built from materials that could withstand the heat of a sun and the cold of deep space. Inside its crystalline walls, representatives from 47 different species gathered in their designated sectors, each breathing their preferred atmosphere, each comfortable in their own environmental bubble. The meeting had been called in secret, with only the highest-ranking officials from each civilization in attendance. The topic was too dangerous, too controversial to discuss in open session. Ambassador Thexnor of the Valorian Empire stood at the central podium, his 6 arms folded in a gesture that conveyed deep concern to those familiar with his species. His scaled skin, normally a vibrant purple, had dulled to an anxious gray. Behind him, holographic displays showed star charts and tactical readouts that made even the most battle-hardened warriors in the room shift uncomfortably. "Honored representatives," Thexnor began, his voice translated instantly into 46 different languages by the Council's sophisticated systems. "We can no longer ignore what the humans have become. In the 300 cycles since they joined our community, they have proven themselves to be the single most unpredictable force in known space." A murmur rippled through the assembled crowd. The Krell delegation, known for their logical approach to all matters, activated their communication array. Their spokesperson, a being of pure energy contained within a magnetic field, pulsed with measured frequency. "Ambassador Thexnor, the humans have been valuable allies. They have honored every treaty, contributed to scientific advancement, and fought beside us against the plague swarms of the Outer Rim." "That is precisely my point," Thexnor replied, manipulating the holographic display with 2 of his hands while gesturing emphatically with the others. "Look at these records. When the plague swarms attacked Sector 7, every military strategist in the galaxy calculated a 78% chance of total defeat. The optimal solution, agreed upon by every advanced AI and tactical computer, was to evacuate and establish a defensive perimeter. The humans rejected this advice." The display showed footage from the battle. Human ships, smaller and less technologically advanced than most of the fleet, broke formation and charged directly into the swarm. But they didn't use conventional weapons. Instead, they had retrofitted their vessels with massive speakers and broadcast systems. "They used music," Thexnor said, his voice barely concealing his bewilderment. "They analyzed the plague swarm's communication frequencies and realized the creatures used something similar to echolocation. So the humans created what they called the most annoying playlist in the universe and broadcast it at maximum volume directly into the swarm. The creatures became so disoriented that they turned on each other." The Krell representative pulsed rapidly, their equivalent of laughter. "Ingenious adaptation. This proves their value." "Or their danger," Thexnor countered. "The battle plan was impossible. No computer could have predicted it. No logical species would have attempted it. Yet it worked, and this is not an isolated incident." He changed the display to show a dozen other scenarios. In each one, humans had faced seemingly impossible odds and had responded with solutions that defied conventional wisdom. They had negotiated peace with the warlike Hrothi by challenging them to a cooking competition. They had escaped the inescapable prison moon of Zerth by befriending the guards and teaching them a card game. They had even resolved a tense diplomatic incident by having their ambassador perform what they called stand-up comedy for 17 hours straight. "Every species in this council operates within predictable parameters," Thexnor explained. "The Krell use logic. The Hrothi use strength. My own people use diplomacy and tradition. But humans? They use everything and nothing. They are chaos given form." An ancient being from the Korthal Collective, a species that had been exploring the stars for 10,000 years, activated its communication device. The Korthal rarely spoke in council meetings, preferring to observe and advise only when absolutely necessary. When one of them chose to address the assembly, Everyone listened. "I have studied the humans extensively," the Korthal said, its voice like wind through crystal caves. "Their unpredictability stems from their evolutionary history. They are the only species we have encountered that developed intelligence while simultaneously remaining apex predators. Most sentient species evolved as prey animals, developing intelligence to hide, to plan, to avoid conflict. Others evolved from pack hunters, learning to work together, to follow strategies, to maintain hierarchy. Humans evolved as persistence hunters and pack strategists simultaneously. They learned to both follow complex plans and abandon them entirely when instinct demanded. The Korthal's environmental sphere shifted colors as it continued. More significantly, humans developed on a death world. Their planet, which they affectionately call Earth, has tried to kill them in every possible way. Massive storms, deadly predators, poisonous plants, extreme temperature variations, tectonic instability. Yet not only did humans survive, they thrived. They learned to adapt to any environment, to find solutions where none should exist, to laugh in the face of extinction. "Laugh?" another representative asked, confused by the translation. "A human stress response," the Korthal explained. "When faced with overwhelming danger, humans often produce vocalizations of amusement. They find humor in their own potential demise. This psychological adaptation allows them to function when logic would demand surrender." Thexnor nodded grimly. "Which brings me to the reason for this emergency session. 3 days ago, we lost contact with a scientific outpost on Meridian 9. The station was studying a spatial anomaly that appeared to be a naturally forming wormhole. We sent a rescue team. What they found—" He paused, seeming to struggle with how to continue. "Perhaps it is best if you see for yourself." The holographic display changed to show helmet camera footage from the rescue team. They had found the station intact but empty, with signs of a hasty evacuation. But there were no distress signals, no signs of violence, nothing to indicate what had happened. The team followed a trail of strange markings to the anomaly chamber. Inside, they found Lieutenant Commander James Chen, the station's human science officer, floating in a makeshift magnetic harness directly in front of the active wormhole. He was surrounded by equipment that had clearly been assembled from cannibalized station components. His eyes were closed, and he appeared to be in some kind of trance. "Chen," the rescue team leader called out. "What happened? Where is everyone?" Chen's eyes opened slowly. He smiled, which several species found disturbing in tense situations. "Captain Rodriguez evacuated everyone when I told her what I needed to do. I asked her to wait exactly 72 hours before sending help." "What are you doing?" "Solving a problem," Chen replied calmly. "The wormhole was destabilizing. In approximately 6 days, it would collapse inward and create a cascading dimensional rupture that would destroy everything within 100 light-years. Every simulation showed this outcome with 99.7% certainty." The rescue team leader's voice became urgent. "Then why didn't you evacuate immediately? Why are you still here?" "Because there was a 0.3% chance I could stabilize it," Chen said. "I've been testing a theory about using precisely timed graviton pulses to reinforce the wormhole structure. The math said it was impossible, but—" He gestured around him at the cobbled-together equipment. "The math didn't account for creative engineering. You gambled billions of lives on a 0.3% chance?" Chen's smile widened. "I gambled on human ingenuity, and according to my readings, I succeeded. The wormhole is now stable and will remain so for at least 10,000 years. You're welcome, by the way." The footage ended, and the council chamber erupted in heated debate. Species shouted across language barriers, environmental bubbles flickered with agitation, and several delegations demanded immediate action. Thexnor raised all 6 arms, calling for silence. "This is what I mean. Chen acted alone, against all logic, against all probability. He risked everything on an impossible solution." And it worked. But what if it hadn't? What if his 0.3% gamble had failed? But it didn't fail, the Krell representative pointed out. Chen saved billions of lives. This time, Fexnor emphasized, but humans do this constantly. They see impossible odds and treat them as challenges rather than warnings. They take risks that no sane species would consider. And somehow, through methods we cannot predict or replicate, they succeed far more often than probability suggests they should. The ancient Korthel spoke again. You fear them because you cannot control them. You cannot predict them. Every other species operates within known parameters, but humans exist outside our ability to model their behavior. This is why you called this meeting. You wish to find a way to limit their influence. Fexnor's skin flushed a deeper gray. I seek to protect the stability of our galactic civilization. Humans have been members of our community for only 3 centuries. Already they have disrupted trade routes with their creative business practices, revolutionized 17 different scientific fields, and their cultural exports have influenced 600 worlds. At this rate, in another 1,000 years, human unpredictability will be the dominant force in the galaxy. What happens when that power is turned against us? You assume it will be, a new voice said. Everyone turned to the entrance, where the human delegation had just arrived. Captain Elena Rodriguez strode into the chamber with her team behind her, their environmental suits unnecessary in the Earth-standard atmosphere they maintained in their sector. She was a tall woman with dark skin and eyes that seemed to miss nothing. Despite the formal nature of the council, she wore her military uniform with casual confidence. Captain Rodriguez, Fexnor said, clearly surprised by the interruption. This is a closed session. About humans, Rodriguez replied. Did you really think we wouldn't notice? Your security measures are excellent by galactic standards, but you're dealing with a species that hacked into the Valorian military database when we were still using chemical rockets. We've been listening to every word. The admission caused another wave of chaos in the chamber. Rodriguez waited patiently for it to die down, then continued. Ambassador Fexnor is right about one thing. We are unpredictable. We do take risks that seem insane to other species. We do find solutions in places where logic says none exist. But he's wrong about why. She activated her own holographic display, showing images of Earth. Humanity's homeworld looked beautiful from space, but the images zoomed in to show the harsh realities. Hurricanes that could level cities, earthquakes that split continents, volcanoes that blotted out the sun, and countless other natural disasters. We come from a world that tried to kill us every single day, Rodriguez explained. We didn't have the luxury of developing pure logic or strict hierarchies or any single survival strategy. We had to be flexible. We had to be creative. We had to be willing to try impossible things because the alternative was extinction. She changed the display to show human history, cave paintings, ancient civilizations, technological progress, space exploration. We learned to laugh at danger because fear would have paralyzed us. We learned to find joy in challenges because despair would have destroyed us. We learned to take chances because playing it safe meant dying slowly instead of quickly. Rodriguez looked directly at Fexnor. You called this meeting because you fear what we might become. You fear that our unpredictability makes us dangerous. But here's the truth that every human child learns. The universe is chaotic and cruel and completely indifferent to our survival. The only reason we exist is because our ancestors were brave enough, crazy enough, stubborn enough to keep trying when everything said they should give up. She paused, letting her words sink in. You want to know if we'll turn our power against you? The answer is no. Not because we're saints, but because we've learned something that most species haven't had to learn. We've learned that survival isn't about being the strongest or the smartest or the most logical. It's about adapting, about finding allies, about building something bigger than ourselves. The Krell representative pulsed thoughtfully. You suggest that human unpredictability is not a threat, but an asset. I'm saying it's reality, Rodriguez corrected. The galaxy is full of threats you can't predict. The plague swarms were supposed to be extinct. The wormhole on Meridian 9 shouldn't have existed. Next month, there will be some other impossible crisis that all your computers and logic and careful planning can't solve. When that happens, you'll need someone crazy enough to try the impossible solution. You'll need humans. Thexner shook his head. You make a compelling argument, Captain, but the fear remains. If we cannot predict your actions, how can we trust you? Rodriguez smiled, and several species recognized it as the expression humans wore when they were about to make a point. Let me tell you a story. 500 years ago, Earth was divided into competing nations. We fought wars over resources, over ideology, over which imaginary lines on a map were correct. We came close to destroying ourselves dozens of times. Every alien species that studied us before first contact predicted we would kill ourselves within a century. But you didn't, the ancient Corthel observed. No, we didn't. Do you know why? Because we learned something crucial. We learned that our strength wasn't in our predictability or our logic or our adherence to tradition. Our strength was in our ability to change, to adapt, to imagine a different future and then build it even when everyone said it was impossible. Rodriguez gestured to her team. Lieutenant Commander Chen didn't risk billions of lives on a whim. He calculated the odds, understood the stakes, and made a choice based on his assessment that the risk of trying was lower than the risk of doing nothing. He might have been wrong, but he was willing to be wrong if it meant potentially saving all those lives. That's not chaos, that's courage. The council chamber fell silent as representatives considered her words. Finally, the ancient Corthel spoke. Captain Rodriguez has reminded us of something we have forgotten. The galaxy is not safe. It has never been safe. We built our civilization on the belief that through logic and cooperation, we could create predictability, stability, order. But the universe does not respect our desires for order. It simply is. The Corthel sphere brightened. Perhaps the humans are not a threat to our stability. Perhaps they are a reminder that true stability is an illusion, and survival requires the courage to face chaos rather than hide from it. Other representatives began to speak, and gradually the hostility in the chamber transformed into something else. Not quite acceptance, but a grudging respect. The humans were strange, unpredictable, often frustrating, but they were also effective in ways that defied explanation. Thexnor finally lowered his arms in a gesture of concession. I still have concerns, he admitted, but perhaps I have been approaching this from the wrong perspective. Captain Rodriguez, if humans are to remain full members of this council, we need some way to work with your unpredictability rather than against it. I have a proposal, Rodriguez said. Establish a joint task force for impossible problems. When you encounter situations where logic fails, where simulations show no solution, where conventional wisdom says there's no hope, call us. Let humanity be your backup plan. We'll take the crazy risks, try the impossible solutions, and either succeed brilliantly or fail spectacularly. Either way, you'll have tried everything. The Krell representative pulsed rapidly. A chaos contingency. I find this concept simultaneously logical and illogical, which I suspect is precisely the point. Humans have a saying, Rodriguez added, when you're going through hell, keep going. We've been through hell more times than we can count. We know the way out. The vote was taken. By a narrow margin, the council agreed to Rodriguez's proposal. The human delegation would be given special status as the contingency force, called upon when all other options had been exhausted. It wasn't trust exactly, but it was an acknowledgement that the galaxy needed someone willing to do what others wouldn't. As the meeting adjourned and representatives returned to their homeworlds, Texnor approached Rodriguez privately. I want you to know, Captain, I still fear what humans might become. Good, Rodriguez replied. We fear it too. Fear keeps us honest. It reminds us that power without responsibility is just destruction. The difference is we don't let that fear stop us from moving forward. Texnor's skin shifted to a thoughtful blue. Your species is very strange. Thank you, Rodriguez said with a grin. We try. 3 months after the council meeting, the first crisis that required the new contingency force arrived. A colony ship carrying 10,000 settlers from the peaceful Yithrin collective had been caught in a gravitational anomaly and was being pulled toward a black hole. The ship's engines couldn't break free, and there wasn't enough time to mount a conventional rescue operation. Every simulation showed the same result: total loss of life within 18 hours. The distress call reached Earth Command at 0600 hours. By 0630, a human response team was already in transit, led by Commander Devin Wright, a specialist in what the military classified as unconventional solutions. His ship, the Audacity, was smaller and faster than most military vessels, designed for rapid response rather than sustained combat. Wright was a compact man with graying hair and a permanent expression that suggested he found the universe amusing. He had earned his reputation during the Fringe Wars by defeating a pirate fleet using nothing but emergency supplies and what he called aggressive creativity. His service record was filled with commendations and reprimands in roughly equal measure. Status report, Wright said, as his team assembled in the briefing room. Lieutenant Akemi Tanaka, the ship's engineer, pulled up holographic displays showing the trapped colony ship. The Yithrin vessel is caught in the accretion disk. They're being pulled in at increasing velocity. Standard tractor beams won't work at this distance, and even if we could attach cables, our engines aren't powerful enough to pull them free. Time until event horizon? Wright asked. 17 hours, 32 minutes, said Dr. Okonkwo, the ship's physicist. Once they cross that threshold, not even light can escape. The gravitational forces will tear the ship apart long before they reach the singularity. Wright nodded, studying the readouts. His team watched him expectantly. They had worked together long enough to recognize when their commander was formulating one of his infamous plans. The Yithrin ship is still intact, Wright observed. Their shields are holding? For now, Tanaka confirmed, but they're not designed for this kind of stress. The shields will fail within 10 hours. We need to think about this differently, Wright said, pacing around the holographic display. We can't pull them out. The black hole is too strong. But what if we don't try to fight the gravity? What if we use it? Okonkwo frowned. Use it how? The gravitational pull is the problem. It's only a problem if we think of it that way, Wright replied. A black hole is basically the universe's most powerful engine. It takes everything nearby and accelerates it to incredible speeds. What if we turn the colony ship into a slingshot? His team exchanged confused glances. Tanaka was the first to understand. You want to aim them at the black hole? Not into it, Wright clarified. Around it. We calculate a trajectory that takes them close enough to the event horizon to use the black hole's gravity to accelerate, but at an angle that will fling them back out into normal space, like a gravitational slingshot. That's insane, Okonkwo said, but he was already running calculations on his tablet, his objections fading as the numbers appeared. Wait, this could actually work. If we time it perfectly, if the trajectory is exact, if the ship can withstand the forces, yes, theoretically possible, but the margin of error is measured in meters at relativistic speeds. What are the odds of success? Wright asked. Okonkwo looked up from his calculations. Honestly, 4%. Maybe 5 if everything goes perfectly. Wright smiled. Better than 0. Contact the Yithrin ship. Tell them we have a plan. The Yithrin captain appeared on the communication screen, his species' distinctive crystalline features refracting light in patterns that indicated extreme stress. Commander Wright, We received your message. Your proposal is, he searched for diplomatic words, unprecedented. It's completely crazy, Wright agreed cheerfully. But right now, crazy is all we've got. Your ship will need to drop shields at a precise moment, fire all maneuvering thrusters in a specific sequence, and trust our navigation completely. Can you do that? The Yithrin captain's crystalline structure shifted through several colors before settling on resigned acceptance. Commander, my people have studied humans since you joined the galactic community. We have learned that when humans propose impossible solutions, they somehow succeed more often than mathematics suggests. I will trust your insanity. Best decision you'll make today, Wright said. We're uploading the flight plan now. My team will guide you through every step. The Audacity took up position between the black hole and the colony ship, using its more powerful engines to maintain a stable orbit. For the next 12 hours, the human crew worked with the Yithrin ship's crew, making microscopic adjustments to the trajectory, calculating gravitational variations, and preparing for what everyone knew was either going to be a miracle or a disaster. Wright moved through his ship, checking on each station, offering encouragement, and maintaining the calm confidence that his crew had come to depend on. He found Tanaka in the engine room, triple-checking the power systems. You okay? He asked. Tanaka didn't look up from her work. We're about to deliberately fly a colony ship with 10,000 people toward a black hole, hoping that our calculations are accurate enough to save them instead of killing them faster. So no, Commander, I'm not okay. I'm terrified. Good, Wright said. Fear means you understand the stakes. That's when humans do their best work. Is that supposed to be comforting? Not really, Wright admitted, but it's true. Our species didn't conquer Earth by being fearless. We did it by being afraid and doing the impossible thing anyway. Tanaka finally looked at him. You really believe this will work? I believe we're going to try our absolute best to make it work, Wright replied. Everything else is just math and luck. The final countdown began with 2 hours remaining. The Audacity synchronized its systems with the Yithrin colony ship, creating a shared navigation network. Every calculation had been checked and rechecked. Every variable had been accounted for. Now came the hard part, execution. Yithrin vessel, this is Audacity, Wright broadcast. Begin trajectory adjustment on my mark. 3, 2, 1, mark. The colony ship's thrusters fired in a carefully orchestrated sequence, each burst precisely timed to alter their trajectory by fractions of a degree. The Audacity's computers monitored every change, making real-time adjustments to account for gravitational variations and relativistic effects. Looking good, Tanaka reported. They're on course, approaching optimal trajectory in 45 minutes. The next 45 minutes felt like years. The crew watched their screens in tense silence as the colony ship accelerated toward the black hole. The gravitational forces increased exponentially, and the Yithrin ship's shields strained under the pressure. Shields at 60%, Okonkwo announced. They're holding, but it's going to be close. Wright kept his voice steady. Yithrin vessel, prepare for shield drop. You'll need to cut power to shields and redirect everything to structural integrity fields. You'll be vulnerable for approximately 8 seconds. Understood, the Yithrin captain replied, his voice remarkably calm considering the circumstances. The colony ship continued its plunge toward the event horizon. On the Audacity's view screens, the black hole dominated the view, a massive absence in space that bent light around its edges. It was beautiful and terrifying in equal measure. Approaching drop point, Tanaka said. 30 seconds. 20 seconds. 10 seconds. Shield drop in 3, 2, 1. Now! The Yithrin ship's shields vanished, and for 8 eternal seconds, only the ship's structural integrity fields protected 10,000 lives from the crushing gravity of the black hole. The colony ship dove toward the event horizon at a precisely calculated angle. Wright watched the trajectory displays, his hands gripping the armrests of his chair. The numbers were perfect. Too perfect. There was no room for error. "Firing thrusters! Now!" the Ythrin captain announced. The colony ship's engines ignited at full power, combining with the black hole's immense gravity to slingshot the vessel away from the event horizon. For a moment, the ship seemed to hang at the edge of destruction, caught between being pulled in and thrown out. Then it shot forward, accelerating to speeds that made the laws of physics scream in protest. The ship carved a gravity well through space, using the black hole's power to fling itself away at velocities that would have been impossible with any conventional propulsion system. "They're clear," Okonkwo shouted. "The trajectory held. They're clear of the gravitational well." The Audacity's bridge erupted in cheers. Even Wright allowed himself a broad smile as he watched the colony ship speed away to safety. "Ythrin vessel, this is Audacity. How's everyone doing over there?" The Ythrin captain appeared on screen, his crystalline features now pulsing with colors that indicated joy and relief. "Commander Wright, we survived. All 10,000 colonists are safe. Your impossible plan worked." "That's what we do," Wright replied, "though I'd appreciate it if you describe it as improbable rather than impossible in your official report. Makes the bureaucrats less nervous." As the Audacity escorted the colony ship to the nearest safe harbor, word of the rescue spread through the galactic communication networks. Within hours, the story had reached every corner of civilized space. The humans had done it again, turning certain death into improbable survival through sheer audacity and creative thinking. On the Valorian homeworld, Ambassador Thexnor received the report and spent several hours staring at the data. The humans had taken a 4% chance and succeeded. Any other species would have considered those odds a guaranteed failure. But humans saw 4% and thought, "So you're saying there's a chance?" He composed a message to Captain Rodriguez. "You were right. The galaxy needs someone brave enough to try the impossible. I am beginning to understand why humans frighten us so much. It is not because you might turn against us. It is because your very existence challenges everything we believe about the universe." Rodriguez's response came quickly. "Don't worry, Ambassador. We challenge ourselves too. That's how we grow." Fexnor found himself making a gesture that, for his species, indicated reluctant admiration. The humans were chaos personified, unpredictable and often frustrating. But perhaps chaos was exactly what an ordered galaxy needed. 6 months after the Ythrin rescue, Commander Wright received a summons to appear before the full Galactic Council. He arrived expecting a commendation, or perhaps another bureaucratic discussion about proper procedures. What he found was something entirely different. The council chamber was packed with representatives from hundreds of worlds, far more than normally attended regular sessions. Wright was directed to stand at the central podium, a position usually reserved for ambassadors and heads of state. Ambassador Thexnor addressed the assembly. "Commander Devon Wright, you stand before this council as a representative of humanity's contingency force. Your actions at the Ythrin rescue have been analyzed by our finest minds, studied by our best strategists, and debated by our wisest philosophers. The consensus is clear. What you did should have been impossible." Wright shrugged, uncomfortable with the formal attention. "With respect, Ambassador, it wasn't impossible. It was just really, really hard." "That distinction," the ancient Korthel interjected, "is precisely why we have gathered today. Commander Wright, you faced odds of 4% and succeeded. Most species would have declared those odds equivalent to 0. But humans don't think that way, do they?" "No, we don't," Wright agreed. 4% isn't 0. It means that if we try 25 times, one of those times we'll succeed. And if we're clever enough, brave enough, and creative enough, maybe we can push that 4% to 5, or 10, or even 50. We don't accept impossible until we've exhausted every possible option and several impossible ones. The Krell representative pulsed thoughtfully. We have studied human history extensively since the Yithrin incident. We discovered that humans have a peculiar relationship with probability. When faced with overwhelming odds, you do not surrender to statistics. Instead, you seek to become the outlier, the exception, the improbable success that proves the rule wrong. It's how we survived, Wright explained. Earth wasn't kind to us. Evolution wasn't kind to us. The universe certainly hasn't been kind to us. But we're still here because our ancestors refused to accept that impossible meant inevitable. They found ways to hunt animals faster and stronger than themselves. They found ways to survive ice ages and droughts and plagues. They looked at 0.01% chances and said, let's give it a shot. Thexnor stepped forward, his 6 arms moving in a formal pattern. Commander Wright, the Council has made a decision. The human contingency force will be expanded and given broader authority. When member civilizations face scenarios where conventional solutions fail, they will be authorized to request human assistance. You will have access to resources, personnel, and technology from across the galaxy. Your mission will be to do what humans do best: attempt the impossible. Wright felt the weight of that responsibility settle on his shoulders. Ambassador, that's a lot of trust to place in a species you said you feared 6 months ago. We still fear you, Texnor admitted, but we have learned that some fears are worth embracing. The universe is vast and full of dangers we cannot predict. Having someone willing to face those dangers with creativity and courage rather than pure logic is valuable. The ancient Korthel added, you asked the ambassador 6 months ago to think of humans as a backup plan. We have realized that you are not a backup plan. You are a reminder that the universe does not respect our carefully laid plans, and survival requires adaptation. You are not predictable, and that is precisely why we need you. The Council voted, and the measure passed with overwhelming support. The human contingency force was officially recognized and granted special status. Wright returned to the Audacity with orders to recruit a larger team and prepare for missions that defied conventional problem-solving. As he settled back into his command chair, Tanaka approached with a tablet full of personnel files. Commander, we've received over 10,000 applications from humans wanting to join the contingency force. People are calling it the Department of Impossible Solutions. Wright laughed. I like that, though we should probably come up with an official name that sounds more bureaucratic. How about the Unconventional Crisis Response Division? Catchy, Tanaka said dryly. Sir, can I ask you something? Do you think we'll always succeed? 4% odds worked once, but statistics suggest we'll fail eventually. Of course we'll fail, Wright replied honestly. Probably more often than we succeed, at least at first. But here's the thing about humans that other species don't fully understand yet. We learn more from our failures than our successes. Every time we fail, we figure out what went wrong, we adapt our approach, and we try again. That's what makes us unpredictable. We don't repeat the same strategies, we evolve them. The Audacity departed from the Council station, carrying its crew toward whatever impossible crisis would emerge next. Throughout the galaxy, other species watched the humans with a mixture of fear, hope, and curiosity. The beings who had laughed at danger and turned 0.3% chances into victories were now officially responsible for solving problems that no one else could. In the months and years that followed, the human contingency force would face challenges that tested the limits of creativity and courage. They would save worlds through methods that computers said couldn't work. They would negotiate peace using tactics that diplomats said would fail. They would defeat enemies using strategies that military doctrines said were suicide. And sometimes they would fail. Sometimes the 4% odds would be exactly what they seemed: overwhelming likelihood of defeat. But even in failure, humans would learn, adapt, and prepare for the next attempt. On Earth, in the archives of human history, scholars added new entries to the long list of times humanity had faced impossible odds. The predators they shouldn't have been able to hunt, the environments they shouldn't have been able to survive, the technologies they shouldn't have been able to develop, the wars they shouldn't have been able to win, and now the galactic crises they shouldn't have been able to solve. The pattern was clear. Humans didn't respect the word impossible. They treated it as a challenge, a puzzle, a problem waiting for a creative solution. Other species saw probability as a prediction. Humans saw it as a suggestion. Ambassador Thexner, in his private journals, wrote, "I have come to understand why the humans frighten us. It is not their technology or their numbers or their physical capabilities. It is their refusal to accept the universe's verdict. When reality says something cannot be done, humans ask, why not, and then proceed to do it anyway. This is not logic. This is not reason. This is something else entirely. Perhaps we do not have a word for it in our language. The closest translation would be defiance. Not defiance of law or authority, but defiance of impossibility itself." He continued, "The galaxy has been stable for thousands of years because every species understands and accepts certain fundamental limitations. We know what is possible and what is not. We operate within known parameters. We respect the boundaries of reality." Then came the humans, who apparently never received the message about boundaries. They push against every limitation, question every assumption, and refuse to accept that 4% means no. They are chaos incarnate, and the terrifying thing is, it works. The journal entry concluded, "Perhaps the most frightening realization is this: the humans are still young. They have been in space for barely 3 centuries. They are children by galactic standards, and yet they have already changed how we think about problem solving. What will they become in another 1,000 years? In 10,000? Will they find a way to break the light-speed barrier that has constrained space travel since the first civilization reached for the stars? Will they discover solutions to problems we have not yet encountered? The answer, I suspect, is yes, because that is what humans do. They solve impossible problems and then go looking for more impossible problems to solve." Far from the political centers of galactic power, in the quiet corners of space where ordinary beings live their lives, a new phrase began to spread through the population. When someone faced a situation that seemed hopeless, when all conventional options had been exhausted, when logic and reason said there was no path forward, beings from 100 different worlds began to say the same thing. Maybe we should ask a human. It started as a joke, a reference to the growing legend of human unpredictability. But gradually, it became something more. It became an expression of hope. Because if there was one thing everyone had learned about humans, it was that they specialized in finding ways forward when there should be none. On a mining colony in the Outer Rim, when an equipment failure trapped 50 workers underground with no apparent way to rescue them, someone said, "Maybe we should ask a human." A human engineer named Kowalski arrived, looked at the situation for 15 minutes, then organized the trapped miners to start singing in coordinated frequencies. The vibrations from their collective voices destabilized the rock formation just enough to create a new path to the surface. It shouldn't have worked, but it did. On a diplomatic mission between two species on the brink of war, when centuries of negotiations had failed to produce peace, someone said, "Maybe we should ask a human." A human mediator named Jackson arrived, listened to both sides argue for 3 days, then suggested they stop trying to find common ground and instead celebrate their differences. She organized a cultural exchange where each species taught the other their most valued traditions. Within a week, the warring parties were laughing together. It shouldn't have worked, but it did. On a scientific research station studying a stellar phenomenon that could potentially destroy a solar system, when all the calculations showed no way to prevent the catastrophe, someone said, "Maybe we should ask a human." A human physicist named Dr. Patel arrived, looked at the data, and asked a simple question. What if we're measuring it wrong? She approached the phenomenon from an entirely different theoretical framework, one that other species had dismissed centuries ago as mathematically inelegant. Her framework revealed a solution hidden in what everyone else had considered measurement noise. It shouldn't have worked, but it did. Each success added to the growing legend. Humans became known not as the strongest species, or the smartest, or the most advanced. They became known as the species that refused to accept defeat, that found joy in challenges, that laughed at danger and danced at the edge of disaster. They were unpredictable, often frustrating, occasionally infuriating, but they were also undeniably effective. Commander Wright and the contingency force grew from a small team on a single ship to a vast network of specialists stationed throughout the galaxy. They trained other species in what they called creative problem solving, though most of those who attended the training sessions left more confused than enlightened. The human approach to impossible problems seemed to defy systematic teaching. It required a fundamental shift in thinking that most species found uncomfortable. You want us to ignore the computer projections? A Valorian trainee asked during one session, clearly distressed by the concept. Not ignore, Wright corrected, question. Computers can only work with the data and parameters they're given. Sometimes the solution lies outside those parameters. Sometimes you need to change the rules of the game instead of playing by the established rules. But how do we know when to change the rules? Another trainee asked. Wright smiled. That's the tricky part. There's no formula. You develop an instinct for it. You learn to feel when the conventional approach won't work, when the situation requires something different. It's part logic, part intuition, part desperation, and part sheer stubbornness. That sounds highly unreliable, the Valorian trainee observed. It is, Wright agreed cheerfully, but unreliable methods that sometimes work are better than reliable methods that always fail. When you're facing impossible odds, 4% is better than 0. The training sessions rarely produced students who could match human unpredictability, but they did accomplish something important. They helped other species understand human thinking. They couldn't replicate it, but they could recognize when a situation might benefit from it. They learned to identify the moments when conventional wisdom needed to be set aside and creativity unleashed. Years passed and the human contingency force handled hundreds of missions. Their success rate hovered around 60%, which would have seemed low for any other organization, but was considered miraculous for problems that had been deemed unsolvable. The 40% failure rate was seen not as inadequacy, but as proof that humans were attempting genuinely impossible tasks. Ambassador Thexnor, now considerably older and bearing scales that had shifted through many colors over the years, found himself in an unexpected friendship with Captain Rodriguez. They met regularly to discuss the evolving relationship between humans and the rest of the galaxy. I have been thinking about our first conversation, Thexnor said during one of these meetings, when I called the emergency council session because I feared what humans might become. I believed your unpredictability was a threat to galactic stability. And now? Rodriguez asked. Now I believe I was partially correct, Thexnor admitted. Human unpredictability is a threat to stability, but I have learned that absolute stability is another word for stagnation. The galaxy was stable before you arrived, but it was also unchanging. Problems that seemed unsolvable remained unsolved because everyone accepted them as unsolvable. You have taught us that stability is not always desirable, that sometimes chaos is necessary for growth. Rodriguez nodded thoughtfully. You know what humans fear? We fear becoming predictable. We fear the day when someone can look at us and say, I know exactly what they'll do next. Because once we're predictable, we're vulnerable. The universe is full of things that want to kill us, and the only advantage we've ever had is that we're willing to try things that no one expects. Even things that might kill you faster? Fexnor asked. Especially those things, Rodriguez replied with a grin. Sometimes the only way forward is through the danger, not around it. Other species try to minimize risk. We try to manage it, accept it, even embrace it when necessary. Risk is the price of possibility. As their conversation continued, news arrived of another crisis. A massive asteroid field was on a collision course with an inhabited system. Normal procedures would be to evacuate the planets, a process that would take months and leave billions of beings homeless. The projected casualties were in the millions. The contingency force was called. Commander Wright, now promoted to director of the Unconventional Crisis Response Division, reviewed the situation and assembled his team. Thoughts? He asked, displaying the asteroid field data. Lieutenant Tanaka, now a senior engineer, studied the projections. The field is too large and too diffuse to deflect with conventional means. We don't have enough time or resources to evacuate everyone. The computer gives us a 0.2% chance of success if we attempt to fragment the largest asteroids and hope the resulting debris burns up in the atmosphere. So we need a better option, Wright said. What's the one thing everyone assumes about this situation? Dr. Okonkwo, still serving as the division's lead physicist, spoke up. Everyone assumes we need to stop the asteroids or evacuate the people. Those are the only two options. What if there's a third option? Wright proposed. What if we don't move the asteroids or the people? What if we move the planets? The room fell silent. Finally, Tanaka spoke. Commander, that's completely insane. You can't just move planets. Why not? Wright asked. We have access to the most powerful engines in the galaxy. We have graviton manipulation technology. We have the combined resources of 300 civilizations. What if we use all of that to shift the planet's orbits just enough to avoid the asteroid field? The calculations would be monumentally complex, Okonkwo protested. The slightest error could destabilize the entire solar system. And the energy requirements, he trailed off, already running numbers on his tablet. His expression shifted from skepticism to wonder. It might actually be possible. If we coordinate engines across 50 ships, if we apply graviton pulses at precise intervals, if the planet's orbits are adjusted by exactly 0.03 degrees, it might work. What are the odds? Wright asked. 3%, Okonkwo replied. Maybe 4 if everything goes perfectly. Wright smiled the smile that his crew had learned meant they were about to attempt something impossible. So you're saying there's a chance? Let's do it. The mission required coordination on a scale never before attempted in galactic history. Ships from dozens of different civilizations contributed their resources, positioning themselves around the inhabited planets in the system. Human engineers worked with alien technicians to synchronize systems that had never been designed to work together. Physicists from 100 worlds collaborated on calculations that pushed the boundaries of known science. The galaxy watched. This time, failure would be visible to everyone. If the humans got the calculations wrong, if their impossible plan failed, billions would die. The pressure was immense. Wright stood on the bridge of the Audacity, now the flagship of the largest cooperative fleet ever assembled. Around him, his crew worked with focused intensity. The countdown had begun. All ships report ready, Tanaka announced. Graviton generators charged to maximum, engines synchronized. Director Wright, a communication came in from Ambassador Thexnor, watching from the safety of a distant observation post. The Council wishes you to know that regardless of the outcome, your attempt is appreciated. You are doing what no other species would dare. Appreciated, Ambassador, Wright replied, but we're not doing this for appreciation. We're doing it because 3% is better than 0. The order was given. Across the system, 50 ships fired their engines in perfect synchronization. Graviton pulses washed over the planets, carefully calibrated to create the tiniest shift in orbital mechanics. It was like trying to move mountains with whispers, attempting to redirect worlds with nudges. For 3 agonizing hours, the combined fleet maintained their coordinated effort. The planets slowly, infinitesimally, began to shift in their orbits. The asteroid field continued its relentless approach. "It's working," Okonkwo whispered, watching the trajectory calculations update in real time. "We're actually moving the planets." The asteroid field swept through the system, passing through the space where the planets should have been. But the planets weren't there anymore. They had moved, just enough, just barely enough to avoid catastrophe. The asteroids sailed past harmlessly, continuing their journey through the void. On 3 inhabited worlds, billions of beings looked up at their skies and saw the asteroid field passing overhead like a river of stone. They had been saved by an impossible plan executed by beings who refused to accept impossible as an answer. The galactic communication networks exploded with reaction. Some species expressed awe, others expressed terror at the implications. Humans had just demonstrated they could move planets. What else might they be capable of? But among the general population, among the ordinary beings who went about their daily lives, a different reaction emerged. They looked at what humans had done and felt something unexpected: hope. Because if humans could move planets, if they could turn 3% chances into reality, then perhaps other impossible things were also possible. Perhaps the diseases that had plagued certain species for millennia could be cured. Perhaps the ancient conflicts that had seemed unresolvable could be ended. Perhaps the mysteries of the universe that had confounded scientists for generations could be explained. Perhaps the future could be different from the past. The human gift to the galaxy wasn't technology or strategy, or even their impressive success rate at impossible tasks. The human gift was the belief that impossible was just another problem waiting for a creative solution. They had infected the galaxy with something dangerous and wonderful: hope that things could change. Ambassador Thexnor composed his final journal entry on the subject of humans. "I understand now why we feared them. We feared them because they represented change in a galaxy that had convinced itself that change was dangerous. We built our civilization on predictability and called it wisdom. But humans showed us that predictability is another word for limitation. They taught us that the only true impossibility is refusing to try." He concluded, "The galaxy will never be the same. Humans have shown us that 0.3% is not the same as zero, that 4% is worth attempting, that 3% is better than surrender. They have reminded us that intelligence evolved not to maintain stability, but to solve problems. And the best problems are the ones everyone says cannot be solved. We no longer fear what humans might become. We fear what we might have remained without them." Far from the centers of power, on the Audacity, Commander Wright received word that he was being offered retirement with full honors. He had served for 20 years, led hundreds of missions, saved billions of lives, and earned every commendation the galaxy could offer. He declined. "Why?" Captain Rodriguez asked him during a private communication. She had retired years earlier to teach at the academy, training the next generation of contingency specialists. "Because there are still impossible problems out there," Wright replied. "Still situations where someone needs to try the thing that has a 4% chance instead of accepting zero. I'm not done being that someone." "You've earned your rest," Rodriguez pointed out. "Rest is for when you're dead," Wright said with a grin. "Besides, I've gotten used to defying probability. Feels weird to stop now." The conversation ended, and Wright turned to his crew, the team that had been with him through impossible mission after impossible mission. "So," he said, "who's ready for the next challenge?" They were. They always were. Because that's what humans did. They faced impossible odds and asked, "What if we try anyway?" They looked at certain defeat and said, "Let's give it a shot." They stared into the face of mathematical probability and replied, "Math is just the beginning." And sometimes, just often enough to matter, they won. Not because they were stronger or smarter or more advanced than other species, but because they were willing to be wrong, willing to fail, willing to attempt solutions that no sane being would consider. The galaxy had learned to fear humans, but it was a strange kind of fear. It was the fear of possibility, the fear of change, the fear that the universe might not be as limited as everyone had believed. It was the fear that impossible might not mean what they thought it meant. And in that fear, strange as it was, there was also hope. Because if humans could do the impossible, then perhaps anything was possible. Perhaps the galaxy was not bound by the limitations everyone had accepted. Perhaps the future could be written differently than the past. That was the one thing aliens feared most about humans. Not their power, but their refusal to accept powerlessness. Not their strength, but their refusal to accept weakness. Not their intelligence, but their refusal to accept the intelligence that said things could not be done. Humans had brought chaos to an ordered galaxy, but in that chaos, they had also brought something precious and dangerous and wonderful. The possibility that tomorrow might be different from yesterday, that problems might have solutions, that impossible might just be another word for difficult. And across the galaxy, on hundreds of worlds, in thousands of situations where beings faced challenges that seemed insurmountable, a new question was being asked. A question that would have seemed strange before humans arrived. A question that would shape the future of galactic civilization. What would a human do? The answer was never predictable. It was never logical by conventional standards. It was often terrifying and occasionally insane, but it was always, always interesting. And sometimes, just often enough to matter, it worked. Because humans had taught the galaxy the most dangerous lesson of all, that the only true impossibility is giving up before you try.